I want to thank Dr. Nemko and Shauna Wagner for helping us put on this evening, and especially Dr. Wolf for letting me present with her. I attended a 3-day conference of hers several months ago. Was privileged to be able to do that with dozens of her students who have been studying with her for years and years, some of them for decades. And we are very, very lucky to have her not only in our community, but willing to share this stuff. I've had her at both the schools that I've been principal at, and been following, have both of her books that are relevant to elementary education, have been following her with interest since I've been an administrator in Napa. So I'm honored to be on the stage with her this evening, so thank you, Pat. Just a few housekeeping tips before we get started. You will not distract us at all if you get up and keep eating. Okay, the food is really good, and I encourage you to have seconds or thirds or whatever the number may be. And the restrooms are right outside these doors, and if you didn't know. And again, you won't distract us if you get up and need to step outside or use the restrooms. The flow of the presentation, you all have the handouts in front of you, and this is the PowerPoint that will follow. There's an embedded video that you don't have access to there, but we will take a couple breaks in terms of doing some activities. And I've got the first couple slides, and Pat will take the last few, and then we hope to have time for questions and answers at the end. So neither of us will mind if you shoot your hand up, but if you'd prefer to wait to the end and see if we're going to cover the info, then jot down your questions so you don't lose it, and we will have time at the end for questions and answers, all right? So just a few kind of vocabulary words so that we know what we're talking about here. Media, of course, is broader than just screens. And while most of what we're going to talk about tonight are the electronic devices that you have in front of you, it's important to remember that when we're talking about media and media's impact on us, on how we think and how we act, that it's much broader than just electronic media, right? We're driving down the road, we see billboards, we get junk mail in our mailboxes, magazines come. There's all sorts of things that aren't electronic that are media that influence us. When you think back about the impact of media when you all were growing up, and the exposure that young people have today to media, not only is the type of media different, right? But would you agree that the amount of media exposure has just gone up like this, right? Just incredible. And probably it's a fool's errand to try to even think that we can protect people from that. I mean, it's just, I think that we can all become better consumers of it, and that's part of this evening's goal is to make us aware of media's impact on us so that we can be choosier about what we expose ourselves to and what we don't, and same with our children. You could do a whole course on this next point about how powerful media are and about the ways that media affects us, both consciously and unconsciously, right? The most powerful media is media that gets us to do things without us even knowing. And there's been research done that I've actually learned from Pat about ways that media companies short-circuit the conscious connection that we make with media in order to access these subconscious connections. And just quickly, one thing that I learned in that was that it doesn't matter when you see a commercial, for example, about whether your response to it is positive or negative. If you see, for example, a political campaign, and it just puts you through the roof, you are just mad about that. How can that person say, it's still been an effective commercial because it's ignited your brain in such a way that it's affected your thinking. It's embedded itself now into your head. Have you heard the saying, there's no such thing as bad advertising? I think it's getting at that, right? And that saying was probably around before we had the brain research to support it. All right, and probably the most interesting thing you're going to hear tonight is that, of course, it's not all negative, and I'm sure many of us came tonight thinking, well, the negative effects seem obvious to me. I was curious to hear, well, what kind of research is there that shows that media have positive effects at home for children's behavior, but also at school, academically? And we'll talk about a little bit of that tonight. I'm not going to read this to you. I hope you can all see. If you can't see it, look at your handout, but get a load of these statistics. Now that second one is especially powerful, isn't it? Why is it why would we show that statistic out of the the thousands that we could show? Why is that second statistic so important for us to be aware of? Just the fact that that they're in their bedrooms, or that they're televisions, or that they're broken out. What do you suppose is significant about that statistic?
Well, it's starting so young, and they're inside doing nothing but staring at the screen.
Even 2-year-olds. Okay, so the age is interesting.
Also, that there's no adults maybe monitoring that readily because they're in their bedrooms.
Right. So the fact that there's no adult. I'm repeating things not because you're not speaking loudly enough or that you can't hear each other, but for the purpose of the video in the back. So, right, there's no supervision there, right? And especially for older children who are going to be more curious and who have the wherewithal to change the channel when mom's not looking, that is something that's important for us to be aware of. Yes?
I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, but if you have people, adults or children, watching television before they go to bed, then there's a residual image or emotional content that one goes to sleep with and then affects one's dreams. And if that would be the case, is there a time limit where, in other words, 2 hours before you fall asleep, then the media won't affect your dream state, or is it 4 hours?
It's one.
It's 1 hour?
It's 1 hour.
Before things kind of calm down?
Before things calm down. Now, it depends on what you do in that hour. But they say, no screens at all for an hour before bedtime for any of us if you want to sleep well.
I've noticed that just recently. I'm not a big TV watcher, but we watch TV on our computer now, and I have a laptop. So sometimes I'll watch it on my laptop lying in bed, right? Get a sore neck. But I've noticed that if I watch it and then close it and try to go to bed right after, I don't fall asleep as quickly. I don't know that I don't sleep as well, but I notice that I don't fall asleep as quickly. Interesting question.
I just have to ask again, is there any correlation between the amount of media, electronic media, that one actually watches and the amount of time that one is in REM sleep?
Oh
No.
gosh, that's beyond my pay grade.
You're good. There's no research on that. There's no research. And for REM sleep, what happens with all of you is that you go through 90-minute periods all night long. And your deepest dreaming happens about 90 minutes after you've gone to sleep. And it's called REM sleep, which means rapid eye movement. The body's essentially paralyzed. I mean, the heart and lungs are still working. But the muscles, you're absolutely perfectly still. And it's during this REM sleep. If any of you have a dog, you ever watch a dog sleep and you see the eyelids? They're in REM sleep. You obviously can't watch yourself, or your spouse, stay up and watch and see, but the eyelids do that. So when you go into REM sleep, that's your deepest dreaming. And then you come back up out of REM sleep and you go back in. The amazing thing they're finding out is that during this REM sleep, during your deep dreaming, you literally rehearse what you learned during the day. Any of you have high school students? Okay, if we could convince them the day before a test to sleep 8 hours instead of staying up all night studying, they'd do better. Their brain will actually rehearse. That is assuming they know the information. Okay, yeah. little assumption there. But your brain does rehearse, and it rehearsed what you watched on television, and it rehearses all your experiences during the day, the REM sleep. But I don't know of any correlation between number of hours that you're on electronics or media and the impact.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you would need more REM sleep to balance that, or you'd have less because
Everybody does pretty much the same thing. Every 90 minutes you go in and out and in and out all night long. I will tell you that you as adults need 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep every single night for your brain to work well. Your elementary kids should have 10 to 12, and your adolescents, oh, what was that look? Did you read about the kids who ground up sleeping pills and put them in their parents, made a smoothie for their parents so that they could stay up later and watch television? That was in the news.
Oh my God.
So that's not to try.
Thanks for that information.
I'm sorry. And your adolescents, this is the really tricky one. Starting at age 11 until age 25, that's adolescence, they need 9 3/4. And they're not getting it. So their brains are never working at optimal levels. And I'll go sit down.
Yeah, no, that's great info. It reminds me, a couple of years ago, there was a cover article on Time, it was either Time or Newsweek, about how we're a nation underslept, you know, of sleep, a nation of sleep deprived. There was a word for it. So interesting there, huh? The connection between sleep and the brain, and studying and the brain. I had a coach who said the most important night when you're preparing for an event of sleep is the night 2 nights before the event, right? Because you never know what's going to happen the night before. And what Pat said, if I were a student, I would be thinking to myself, same thing, because that 2 nights ahead of time, you got to get your studying done, because that night before, cramming really isn't going to give you as much value added as, a couple hours of good studying and then some good night's sleep. So let's move on. Here's another page of statistics that might surprise you. A week in the life of an American school-aged child. These are the number of hours that a typical child would spend doing these activities. Non-school computer use, average 10 hours. Watching TV, 31. Alone with dad, 0.5. Children spend more time in front of electronic screens than any other activity except sleeping. And so for most of this presentation, we are going to talk about electronic media and the impacts of screens. So first, just a very, very quick primer about the brain and how it develops and its development at its earliest ages. Learning is really nothing more than the strengthening of the connection of brain cells. And those brain cells connect through things called synapses. And when they become stronger, that's when you're learning. When those synapses become, when you exercise them, they become stronger. They become hardwired, stronger together. And that's the process of learning. So check out these pictures of what this is like a slice of brain tissue from a child at birth and a child at 2 years old. What do you observe about lots of connections made? And not just connections, I think more actual brain cells as well, huh?
No, no more brain cells.
No more brain cells, just all more connections.
More connections.
Huh? And so what's happening at this point in their life? Literally everything is new. Huh? Literally everything is new. Now, can you imagine if it kept going like that for our entire lives? It would look like my attic, or some kids' desks at school. And so a natural part of development, of human development and brain development also is a winnowing process that happens, I know, at around age 3, and then does it happen again regularly or just?
From 2 until about 5, and then again at adolescence.
Okay. You all heard that, from 2 to about 5, and then again at adolescence. And so that's important to know as kids are developing, that you lose what you don't use. Right? And so the question becomes, what are we using at different points in our life? And those are the things that are going to get strengthened. And how does media help us to use those things or lose those things? Does that make sense? Okay. So to the question I posed earlier, are there any upsides to media in early childhood development? And the short answer is yes. There have been a lot of studies done, especially on PBS shows. The early front runner, of course, was Sesame Street, and Mr. Rogers is on the slide here, and you can see the things that, not surprising, that show might engender in young children. There are also some computer games that have been demonstrated through scientific research to increase certain cognitive skills. But one needs to be careful, right, about the way that you read the advertising of these things, because it's possible to paint broad strokes that really aren't supported by research that is as accurate as one might hope. And even in the area of, I get every day stuff across my desk about software programs that will help children learn. I'm their target audience, right? Helping schools buy stuff like this, and one has to just be very, very careful. We always do pilots to make sure that it works for our population, right? Because every different kinds of kids, different needs, it's going to work differently, and people who sell this kind of software, just like people who sell anything else, their livelihood is sales, so their interest is in selling the product. So it's kind of buyer beware on all of this stuff. I don't know if the slide is in here on. We don't have the Baby Einstein slide, or the I think we axed that out. But there are other very famous programs that have been demonstrated not to have any effect. On positive effects on brain development in young children, such as the Baby Einstein. The Baby Einstein videos are the ones that most people have heard about that really have not been demonstrated to be useful in any way.
In fact, the research shows that children who watch a lot of Baby Einstein have less vocabulary than kids who don't.
Did you get that? So what are some causes? What are some reasons that may be true? So not many words in it, and if you're watching the video, you're not interacting, right? Yes?
I have a question about, there's this one channel, it's called Babies First channel.
Babies First?
And said all supposedly like programmed or directed towards, babies, of course, and learning and sensory and numbers and stuff like that. Is that just a bunch of, okay.
I'm not familiar with Babies First.
I'm not either, but I can tell you without watching it that it's not appropriate.
The American Pediatrics Association, American Pediatrics Association, has recommended zero screen time for children up. How did they say it? Through the age of 2 is the way that they phrase it. Through the age of 2. So really up to the age of 3, zero screen time recommended by the APA, I think is the group.
It's the National Association for the Education of the Young Child, the big NAEYC.
Okay. I saw some other questions.
You have one in the back.
I was going to make the comment that talk with parents about that your child's best toy, and that interacting with your child, that they're getting not the flat screen, but that they're getting the visual, they're getting the auditory, they're getting the four-dimensional person, which you cannot get from a TV screen. If they're showing you, the picture of the banana with the label underneath it, just give them a banana, and then they can switch it.
And say the word, and right, let them taste it, right.
Hear it, and they can experience it
Right.
in live,
Right.
in life.
Yes.
Like she's talking about that, some of that, what they're doing is they're putting pictures of, horses and bananas and putting the word underneath it. And instead of that, I'm giving them the banana and having it feel.
So again, the point being a live person being able to give three-dimensional, multimodal interaction with the kid. And I've seen other slides that show It's called functional MRI, slice up brain imaging that shows that when we're doing different things, obviously, different aspects of our brain are working, right? And so if you're just observing or just watching, this kind of goes back to the television question, you know, if your brain becomes what it practices, you're getting better at watching. You're not getting better at saying or feeling or smelling or tasting or talking, or right? And that exactly goes to your point. Okay, any other questions on this? So, yes, thank you.
I had two. One, we know that classical music, that I wasn't exposed to for much later in life, helps with the development of the frontal lobe. So at least that baby Einstein may have something going for it.
Mm.
So the classical music is good for the frontal lobe development. Word book is just a picture with the word under it, unless we say the word out loud.
Right.
It's pretty much the same as baby Einstein. So my point is, if we are watching things with our children, not necessarily observing the children, and if we're watching things with our children or observing them play games, we can input, well, that was a very nice picture. Oh, that was really neat how that worked.
Mm-hmm.
If we watch these things with them, they can become learning.
Mm-hmm. Certainly any experience done with the adult is going to be more beneficial than the experience done without the adult. I think there's no denying that. Do you have any comments about that?
The research on classical music in the frontal lobes has been proven not to be true. Now, classical music is fine, and it does calm some people down. But research on music, we'll talk a little bit about when you're working with very young children, nursery rhymes and songs are one of the best things you can do to make a good reader when they get to school. All right. But the classical music per se, that research has not proven to be true.
What about the comment you're making about a board book versus baby Einstein? Is that, were you saying
I'm
it's kind of the same?
always for reading to kids and talking with them. You're right on target there.
You're saying they were similar though.
It's something like they learn bookness. One of my grandchildren, I have twin grandchildren, and they were read to before they were born. My daughter thought I was crazy, but we read to them before they were born. We started reading to them even when they were looking off in another direction, okay? When Alex was 11 months old, he crawled over to a bookshelf, a low bookshelf where the kids' books were, and he pulled one out, and it fell open, and it was upside down, and he crawled around to the other side. So even at 11 months, they have learned what is the right side of the page, which is upside and down. Yeah. So yes, you're really, yeah.
Does it matter what you read to them? I mean, if I'm reading a book, just a book for my own pleasure, if I'm reading that to him, you know, or does it have to be?
It should be at their level.
Okay.
Yeah, even though it'll bore you out of your skull.
So the question was, does it matter what you read to your child? So, yes?
Pat, can you say, excuse me, that Dr. Seuss was a really...
Dr. Seuss is one of the best books you can read to kids. Yeah, anything by Seuss. This has to do with reading, okay? Mm-hmm. So, I wrote this book called Building the Reading Brain. And what I discovered in the research for writing this book was that the very first phonics that kids get is when we read Dr. Seuss to them. Mm-hmm. Anything that's rhyming. Mm-hmm. Because now they're hearing, they can tell the difference between sounds. You know, are they alike? Are they different? That's your very first phonics. We're not talking about worksheets, but we're talking about that. Kids who learn rhymes and can tell you whether words rhyme or not, even if they're nonsense words, always become better readers. The twins were in the back seat one day and we're playing rhyming games going somewhere. And Kira says, can't find anything to rhyme with grandma. So can we make up words? And I said, sure. So the rest of the trip was shama, lama, dama, camel, you know. But that's great. That's great. That's the development of the language. That's so important.
I would add that it doesn't matter what language you're doing that in.
That's true.
That this idea of word play in any language is good for the language development of a young child. You had a follow-up?
That was actually my question, because we read to him in both English and Spanish.
Yep, it's all good.
Muy bien.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
What about these games like the Cool Math and GG and ST and are those?
You know, they all come with their own research base. So, and ST Math is actually a program that's used quite widely throughout the county. You could probably talk to any of the principals and they would be able to send you the research base on that. I happen to know that ST Math comes out of the Mind Institute, which is out of the South Bay. And so you can look that up. I mean, the question usually isn't, is it research-based? Because now everybody knows to say yes, it is. The question is, what kind of research is behind it? You know, and so it's really incumbent on us to become better consumers, just as we've had to do with medicine, right? Become better consumers of medicine, just as we're now having to do with food, becoming better consumers of food, how to read labels and know where things are from and things like that. So too, you know, with these educational devices.
So if your child was addicted to computer screens and computer games, and you took away all the computer games except for Cool Math or ST Math, then they would do it, correct?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
I'm trying that, okay? So the twins are 8. Kara can read anything you put in front of her. Alex is dyslexic, but is he addicted to the computer? So he gets 30 minutes of screen time. He can't play anything violent, okay? You know, so, but just, you know, Lego.com is what, you know, or Star Wars, okay? He can get additional time by playing Word Monkey or Ninja Math, etc. But don't take away that half hour, because that's the
Oh, I see.
that's what gets him to do the other.
They get the other. Thank you.
Yeah. And I've used that with older children too,
Yeah.
in school settings, that if you're using a piece of technology as a motivator, it has to be a true motivator. You know, if you turn it into a pseudo motivator, it's not going to work for the behavior that you're trying to change, right? So, always a scientist, Pat, even with her own grandchildren. I'm going to move on to the next slide here, and we can come back to more questions towards the end. So here was the reference on baby Einstein. And we've actually got a video that's going to demonstrate a lot of the stuff in the second half of this slide. The point being that watching violent content affects our behavior negatively. That's the summary of this. It can increase desensitization. It can increase fearfulness. And notice here that the people who are doing this research define violence more broadly than just hitting. Okay. Is there a question? I'm sorry?
I have a teen who debates this issue with me all the time.
Uh-huh.
There's no actual evidence.
We'll show you some. We'll show you some.
And if there's any references that I could show him,
Sure. I got a YouTube video, which they'll, yes.
Yeah, there's several of us who are teenagers here, and
Okay.
I'm with her. I'd like to find out about.
So this is the pivot point of our presentation. And really, this slide has the thesis on it. The point of how media affects the developing brain depends on the age of the child, precisely because the developmental tasks change as humans develop, right? So when I'm 1 and 2, I'm working on different things than I am when I'm 5, and I'm working on different things when I'm 5 than I am when I'm 7, than when I'm 11, right, than when I'm 15. And so really this stands to reason once you hear it, but this is a new way of I haven't seen this presented until I heard it from Dr. Gentile, that the next half of our presentation is going to be looking at the stages of development and how media, what are the developmental tasks of each of those stages of development, and how does media help or hinder the development or the meeting of those developmental tasks. Does that make sense? Okay. And with that, I'll turn it over to Pat.
As far as the research is concerned, I have this group of trainers, and every year, they're called the Brainy Bunch, okay? And every year I bring in some leading neuroscientists to discuss a particular topic. They come from all over, 30, 45 people. And this past year, we had 2 people come to talk to us on this very topic. And so the research, those of you who want the research to show to your teens, you email me. Now, how do you email me? Just go to my website, which is patwolf.com, all right? And my email's on there. And I'll send you the article. So this Ron Gentile, Dr. Gentile we had from the University of Iowa, shared with us the research, and I'll send you his article. Teens, and these were 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. These are older teens, okay, who played an excessive amount of violent games. They literally desensitized their brain to violence. You have a part of your brain called the amygdala, which determines the emotional content, whether something frightens you or whether you like it, etc. And you can see it in brain scans that it really lights up when you're frightened of something. In those kids who played violent games, it doesn't light up as much. It is literally desensitized their brain to violence. Yeah. So when they say it doesn't hurt, you know, even Alex, who's 8-year-old, says, "Why can't I watch those? I know they're fake."
Right. No, I know
And I'm saying because it's changing your brain, you know, and I'm still in charge. You know, so that's.
Is that because even if you know it's fake, you're watching it and
You're watching it. That's right.
Is it
You're going to show you a video. It's a preschool video, but you will see how, you know, Chuck talked about the subconscious, you know. Well, the subconscious is still your brain. It's just the part of the brain you're not aware of, all right? It's still, it is impacted. The brain learns what it does. And when you talked about a second language, you know, the research is very, very clear there, that if a child when a child is born, they are hardwired already for the sounds of every language in the world, 6,000 of them. The sounds they hear repeatedly, that make stronger synapses. The sounds they don't hear, those begin to fade away. And by adolescence, they're all gone. So the prime time to learn a second language is when? Before adolescence, all right? So, you know, and there's big advantages to being bilingual. There are cognitive advantages besides the social advantages of being bilingual, especially in Spanish. You know. Hace muchos años era una maestra de una clase bilingüe, pero ahora se me olvidó todo. So I said I used to be a bilingual teacher, now I don't remember anything because I didn't use it after that. So for the next 30 years, I didn't use it, and a lot of it is gone. Yeah, the earlier they learn it, the better. Okay, so let's talk about stages. We're going to talk about, first of all, children are immersed in an adult world, and you may think that they're not picking up. Well, what was it Gentile or Small who did the Friends? Anyway.
I think it was Gentile.
Gentile. He showed us a video. He said, okay, what television program do young children see the most of? It turned out to be Friends because their parents were watching it. And he showed us a clip of Friends where they're making fun of people and they use the word bitch. And the kids are sitting there watching the program. And we don't think that makes any difference? Oh, yes, it does. And what they're learning from that particular one, they would learn that it's okay to make fun of women, okay? It's okay to make fun of your friends. It's okay to trick your friends. Besides the language, that's what the whole program was about. So we think, well, you know, this program's not going to impact kids. Yes, it does.
Question on this. Has Hollywood ever been under some kind of regulations? Because seriously, they're the ones who are impacting our entire society.
You know, I'm watching,
It's becoming like a pervert. It's like
this PG, you know, forget that. In fact, I do not have television in my house. I have a television set. Okay, so I'm going to show the kids Disney. You know, they get to watch a movie a week when they're with me after school. I'm watching some of them, they're horribly violent. You watched Roadrunner recently?
It's a rude awakening for
It is a rude awakening, and you think it doesn't make any difference? We'll see in a little bit that it does. It impacts their attention, okay? And one of the problems, I know that some people think Sesame Street's fine. I'm not a big fan of Sesame Street. Number one, I think it changes images way too fast for the child's brain. I think numbers and letters do things on Sesame Street that they never do, like change color or run around, you know. I think that adults would much rather watch Sesame Street than Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers drove me up a wall. He talked so slowly. And he'd ask the kids questions and then he'd wait. And then he'd say, I knew you'd know that. It was a perfect program for the kids, not for the adults. Now, let me say something about this. Never watching television before 2. I believe in that. But I will tell you, when I was stuck with the twins, I put on Baby Einstein one day. Just realize you're doing it for yourself, not for them, okay? All right. All right, so let's take a look at 0 to 12 months.
Pat, one thing I would add in about, you know, that we can't control the FTC, but there are some organizations that are advocates for parents who are concerned about marketing's effect on children. And one of them is the Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood. Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood, CCFC. If you Google that, you get on their email list, and they'll send you about every 2 weeks something that you can give input in, and it's oftentimes issues just like this. And then there's also TV Turnoff Week, which you may have just heard about. It just happened a week or 2 ago if your child's school celebrated it. It's another way that in whatever organization you're involved with, now I think they call it Screen Free Week. It's just an awareness campaign, really, to help a wider audience understand the issues that we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, and you better find something else to do. Yeah, because they're going to give you trouble. Okay, so let's look at 0 to 12 months. What are the main things that we want to happen in the first year of life? I will tell you that the key thing is attachment. If you look at the research with the Romanian orphans, these are children in orphanages. They are well fed, they're kept clean, they are not held. All right, they're not touched. And what the research has shown that after 3 years of age, which is when they finally will let some of them be adopted, it doesn't matter what type of home they go into. They are never able to form healthy, intimate, emotional attachments to other people because they didn't get it in the first year. There's nothing more important than holding a baby and talking to a baby. Do not buy the book, Teach Your Baby to Read. That's not what they need. All right, they need regularity of patterns. They need to develop trust. When they cry, someone will pick them up and hold them. That's their very first lesson in trust. So this is what's critical. No evidence that videos or TV have any beneficial impact in the first year of life, okay, unless you need a break. What do you do instead? Read to them. Read to them. Sing to them. Tell them nursery rhymes, jump rope rhymes, anything, make up anything. Now, let's look at this language development. This is really interesting. You have in your brain some brain cells that are called mirror neurons, like a mirror, okay? And they light up when you see someone else do something. You don't necessarily do it. It's why you yawn when you see someone else yawn, all right? What they're finding out about language development, and someone over here said it, you don't learn a language from a tape or from TV. You learn it from a person. And if you will watch babies when you're talking to them, pardon me, I've got some allergies there. They watch your mouth. They're watching your tongue. They're watching your teeth. They're watching your lips. They are practicing talking long before they can talk. So I read this research that it's a mimicking kind of thing without you seeing the child actually doing it, but you can get an example. Babies as young as 1 hour, if you can get them to focus and you stick your tongue out, they'll stick their tongue out. All right? I tried it. The nurses in the lab thought I was out of my gourd, but I wanted to see, and sure enough, it works. So this is why you don't learn a second language from a tape. You know, you learn it from a person. And so this, you know, regular patterns, reading to kids actually improves their probability of reading a huge amount. All right, so now let's go to the next stage. I will tell you if you haven't guessed that I went through my files and picked out pictures of the twins. 1.5 to 2, toddlers, often called the terrible 2s, the terrible 3s, and the fearsome 4s. All right. Curiosity. They are beginning to find out how the world works. They're beginning to find out how you work, what makes you smile, what makes you frown. They need to begin to see themselves as an individual, okay? And they need an opportunity to explore. You know, I know they make a mess, but I am against playpens. Again, unless for their own safety and you need to do something like cook, you know, then that might be so. But the more opportunities they have for gross motor development, they're beginning to crawl maybe. Some kids don't crawl. They're beginning to explore. Everything goes in the mouth, you know, so you really got to watch. This is also a period of beginning to develop some independence. You know, I can do it myself. Is a word, is a phrase you often hear with the 2-year-old. Me do it. Let them try as long as it's safe. Learning of language. This is the key time for language. Research shows that the more you talk to children, the bigger vocabulary they have. I mean, they actually have given the numbers. They went into homes. It was called the Hart and Riesling study. And they actually counted the number of words that the parents used in a given period. And then they checked the kids' vocabulary, and they match. If the parents are busy watching television and not talking much to each other or to the children, neither do the kids. All right. So this is a period where they're going to begin to develop their independence, and especially important for language. Whatever language it is, or 2 languages, fine. On 2 languages, it's really good in a home if you can have one parent speak one language and the other one speak the other consistently.
I was gonna ask you, I heard that some kids can get confused. If they
You've
don't
heard that kids can get confused, and that is false.
really-
No, they do not get confused. I had a college roommate. She was from Japan. She had survived the Hiroshima. Her entire family did not survive. She was adopted into the U.S. at age 3, and by 5 or 6 had forgotten a lot of the Japanese that she had learned. So she speaks English without an accent. Right. So in college, she meets a young man also from Japan, and they get married. Now, he had come to the States as a teenager. He had learned English from a teacher in Japan who spoke English with an accent. So his English was heavily accented. Right. So they made this agreement when their first child was born. He would only speak to the child in Japanese, and she would only speak in English. And it worked beautifully. Little Benji was fluently bilingual, and he would change languages in the middle of a sentence if he turned from one parent to the other. Right. His sister was born a couple years later, same thing, both kids, fluently bilingual. When the children were 3 and 5, they decided to go to Berlin. They took a job working at a refugee camp on the Berlin Wall. And before they left, Hisashi's parents came over from Japan because they'd never seen the children. And little Benji got really upset. Do you have any idea why Benji got upset when his grandmother and grandfather came from Japan? She spoke Japanese. Women only speak English. They're in Germany for 3 years, and guess what? The kids are fluently trilingual, and they're average kids. We've got this wonderful, amazing brain that just picks up all kinds of things. It's called plasticity. It's the only organ in the body that changes as a result of the environment.
If a child has a language in the first year or so of their life,
Right.
and then they don't have that language in there, will they have the ability to get it back, or another language?
That's a really interesting question. What happens is even if they didn't have the language, say grandma's living with you, and grandma speaks Polish, and the child never learns to speak Polish but understands grandma most of the time, if as an adult that child decides to learn, or that person decides to learn to speak Polish, they'll speak it without an accent. But
Do
if
they have
you,
a better way of learning it?
Yes.
Is it easier for them?
yes, yes, because they heard it as a young child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I just can't, we put the twins at Napa Valley Language Academy their first 2 years, where, 80 to 90% of their days in Spanish. And we did move them to another school because Alex has dyslexia, and we felt he needed an English-only school. They still understand anything you say to them in Spanish and carry on pretty decent conversations, just kindergarten and first grade. This is amazing brains we have. Now, I know someone who speaks 5 languages, and he has nothing to say in any of them, so you know. Yeah. Okay, so can you think of any media out there, any kind of media, that's going to help with curiosity, differentiation, independence, and learning of language? Pardon? Human communication. Yeah. Not much media that's gonna do much good. All right, let's move up a little bit. Let's take 2.5 to 5. What are the key tasks here that they have to learn? Well, they have to learn some behavior and self-control. I taught kindergarten. Oh my gosh. Self-control, especially kids who come from only families, or families who'd given them anything they wanted, any time they wanted, And the whole idea of sharing and holding back what you want to say until someone else is through speaking. This is a really critical time for that. Learning emotional self-control. I know some adults who haven't learned that yet. But there are times to express feelings, and there are other times when it might hurt someone else's feelings, so this whole learning of that. Learning gender roles and stereotypes. I was talking to someone, and this was really interesting. His daughter, he said, has never had anyone but a female doctor her whole life. That's just what she's had. It's a family doctor. And they had to go to an emergency, and this woman comes in and said, the father asked her if she would like to become a doctor, and she said, no, only men can be doctors. Now, I don't know where on earth that came from. That's a stereotype that she had heard somewhere or read somewhere. So we have to be really careful because I think gender roles are being evened out, in our culture, that women and men can both engage in almost any profession. Now, can you think of anything in the media that's going to help to develop healthy lifestyles at this point?
Well, all I can say is that media would kind of certainly not help you with self-control, but push you toward less of it, more immediate gratification, more wanting, more addiction. So it's almost like not only is it not supporting the needs of 2.5 to 5, but really pushing it, making a good job of the parent really, really hard.
Yeah. But I'm thinking of the Berenstain Bear books. Are really, really good for this age group because they look at these kinds of issues. When they get the gimmies, when they want everything they see in the store, or So you choose wisely. But what you need to keep in mind is, what am I trying to help this child build during this period? What are the key tasks for this child? And then you pick the media that you feel would help in that way.
Yeah, this is where we have the
Oh.
video too, if you want to show that.
Oh, yes, I want to show it right now. Okay, for anyone who thinks that television programs, good or bad, don't impact the brain, you've got to watch this.
With the National Institute on Media and the Family to see if kids reacted differently as they watched different kinds of programming. They went to a daycare center and filmed from hidden cameras. First, the kids watched Barney.
Hi, everybody.
Popular PBS show with the big purple dinosaur. The group of 2 to 5-year-olds was completely drawn in. They sang, marched, and even after the show was finished, played peacefully together. Teresa's daughter, Hannah, especially loved Barney.
She knows all their names. It's kind of like she gets
It's
to
almost
know
like she
them.
becomes part of that.
She becomes part of the group. Yes.
Yeah.
On day 2, it was the Power Rangers, a popular show with superheroes doing good by beating up and whacking anyone doing bad.
It starts out calm, but within minutes the group has disintegrated, and the kids are copying what they're seeing on the screen and their favorite superhero. We expected a difference between the two shows, but we didn't expect this. Remember, here are the kids with Barney. Here are the kids with Power Rangers. Even Hannah, after a time, joins in.
The first time I've ever seen that.
That was what we found 10 years ago. But would we get the same effect today? Are kids desensitized to media violence and thus affected differently? We didn't know what we would find, but we decided to repeat the experiment. Again, we took our cameras to a local daycare site, hid the cameras, and filmed the kids watching current shows of Barney and then Power Rangers. Just like before, the kids reacted to Barney with,
Why does everyone like Barney? Sitting on the table, my blankie feels so soft like a big marshmallow.
And which color do you like best?
I like red.
One little boy was especially enjoying the show.
But here they're watching Barney, which is, a pretty calm show.
Yes, my kids are really sitting quietly.
This is really about television, not about your kids, because your kids are fine, they're great. But it's really about the teaching power of television.
Watch how the kids interact once the show is over. They use the maracas to make music.
They seem to be getting along okay?
Yeah.
Now here's where they start to watch Power Rangers.
I'm blue. I'm blue. That's the ball. I'm blue. I love blue. Is anyone gonna dare?
While some kids exploded, others were transfixed, clearly identifying with different characters.
Yellow.
You notice any difference in the volume? I mean, the volume of the kids.
Argumentative.
After watching the Power Rangers, the change was immediate and overwhelming. Kids were imitating the very moves their heroes were doing on the screen. The Power Ranger message of beating someone up for a good cause was lost. The group disintegrated. Remember, here are the kids with Barney.
Oh, and what else do I see?
Here are the kids with Power Rangers. What had been instruments after Barney were now weapons. Even the boy who was on the sidelines enthusiastically joins in the group mayhem.
Well, my son was one of the ones that was sitting quietly throughout the whole thing, and now he's bouncing around, hitting people, and just acting crazy. And he's never watched Power Rangers before, and I think he was just
So he's never
mesmerized.
He's never seen Power
taking
Rangers.
it all in, and now he's
I believe that if I don't monitor the child when they're watching certain programs on TV, that they will have more of a rough night of sleeping.
Whoever tells the stories defines the culture. That's the real power, is it's not just kids copying, but then once some kids start to act that way, then the behavior becomes contagious. And so the real impact is not just kids copying, but it starts to shape the norms. And so even kids who may not have copied then join in because all the other kids are doing it.
I took Power Rangers away from my kid because he was play fighting too much.
Okay.
And they were hurting each other.
So you could see it. Okay.
I didn't realize it at first.
The action on the screen carried over to the action in real life, to the extent that you stopped them from watching it.
Yep, I took him away.
And I would guess for most of us, we don't sit and watch our children watching TV and then observe their behavior remotely like that. And so they may be fussier or crankier or a little more combative than usual, but we probably wouldn't even equate it with the TV watching because, we just think they're hungry or they're thirsty or they're, and they need to get outside or something like that. The cause and effect is probably not as clear in our day-to-day lives as it is to us now watching it here.
Right.
So what has changed in 10 years? For one, in violent media, the content has gotten more graphic, more intense. That is as true on a Power Ranger screen as any other screen. Think of some of the video games our kids play. What hasn't changed is the way kids learn, by copying what they see.
The real power of media is in shaping social norms. Remember, whoever tells the stories defines the culture. Today's electronic storytellers are not only contributing to how our children's brains get wired, they also affect how they act in the real world. It's time for us to pay attention to understand how to use media for children's benefit and not harm.
Okay, let's take a quick little, do a little activity here. Would you find yourself a partner and decide which one of you is A and which one's B, please? You might have to move. Okay. All right, raise your hand if you are the B in your partner. Thank you. You're working first. Listen carefully. I want you to pretend that your partner A just walked in the door and missed the first 45 minutes of this presentation. What do you think you have learned about media and the brain that A needs to know? You have 3 minutes.
Sorry, can you say that?
Yes. If you're B, I want you to pretend your partner A just walked in the door. What have you heard so far that you think A needs to know? Time's up. Time's up. When you do this, when you teach something to someone else, you actually strengthen that information in your own brain. Yeah. So it's really important when you're doing homework with your kids, you're observing, that you have them teach you. All right? Because that's what, you don't strengthen your own synapses a lot by listening to someone else tell you. You strengthen them by figuring it out yourself, what you think you know. Let's finish up by taking a look at 6 to 12. These are the last good years. No, I'm not. No. I told my daughter's a single mom, so we're raising the twins together. And I said, I'll stay around until they reach adolescence, and then I'm going. Okay, this is a really, really critical time, and some of the key things they're going to have to learn at this age is how to build friendships and what friendship really means and what loyalty means, all right? Learning the social rules and norms that you don't say everything you'd like to say, that you got to consider someone else's feelings. So this is a time of social learning. Learning the importance of academic achievement and real-world competence, that you're going to have to develop some skills that you're going to need the rest of your life, and beginning to get that idea of why school is important and making those adjustments. And this is when moral development begins. Now, hopefully, it began a long time ago because kids watch what you do, all right? And that has a lot to do with their moral development. When you say, it's okay for me to do it, but it's not okay for you, that just doesn't fly. That just doesn't fly. I mean, obviously, as an adult, there are some things that, like, I asked Kara one day, said, I know what you can do as an adult. And I said, what's that? That I can't do now. And I said, what's that? And she says, drink wine and Diet Coke. Well, those happen to be, no, you can't have any of my Diet Coke. It's not good for you. And the wine thing is something else. Okay, so. Yes.
So, for many years, I've worked with children who have had these stages disrupted.
Yeah.
In and out of foster placement or homelessness.
Right.
And so, what's their chance?
Okay. You have the most plasticity, the highest ability to develop, under normal circumstances, and when you're young. You have much more plasticity when you're young, but it's never too late. It's never too late. Now, in the case of the Romanian orphans, that was really severe neglect, and we don't see that severe neglect. What they have found often, especially in foster kids, my husband was a parole agent. He worked for California Youth Authority, worked with delinquents. And he used to say the mystery is not why kids become delinquent, because so many of them were in really bad homes. The mystery is why some of them don't. And it's called resilience. And what we find is no matter what age you are, what background you've had, if you've got one person who believes in you, sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's a mentor, they can overcome a lot of the very poor environment in which they lived. Yeah. As you get older and older and older, it becomes harder and harder to change a lot of those. But the brain's not done until around 25. So you got lots of chances in here to help kids who, for reasons not of their own, had very poor upbringing, moral development, etc. I know at the Wolf Center, one of our biggest problems is the kids getting their drugs from their parents.
Yes.
Yeah, so. And self-concept. Now, you, when they start to get 11 or 12, I'm afraid you're not as important as their peers. So you kind of want to set some parameters around who their peers are and who they are with. And that is your prerogative to do. Okay.
One of the things I've noticed around that is that still holds true for myself. And I try to spend time with people whose values I admire or who make me feel happy, and then I have really been actively trying to encourage my children to spend time with other children whose values I like and whose parents' values I like, and to kind of not be very proactive about playing with kids that I don't feel that strongly about.
You bet.
But I have to do it for myself as well. I mean, I'm 42 and I'm still trying to make conscious choices about spending time with people who make me feel good or whose values I admire or things like that.
I would totally agree with you on that. Yeah, because who you associate with, and you find yourself doing things you wouldn't do normally when you were with a group that's doing things, even as an adult. So I would agree. Okay, starting about 13, 12, 13, a little bit earlier in girls than in boys. All right. This is a tough time. Does anybody remember their own adolescence? Happy time? No. Okay. You've got. They're trying to build relationships, and they see all these relationships on TV. All right. And the hormonal changes. It's really interesting that if you go back to when our ancestors lived in caves and on savannas, you know what the average lifespan was? 27. Yeah. So the hormones kicked in and the ability to procreate starts at adolescence, and the brain hasn't changed. So those hormones are there. All right. And we have a culture that says, no, that's way too soon. All right, you're not ready for that. So we're faced with a dilemma here. But it's not just hormones, all right? There are tremendous changes taking place in the adolescent brain, especially in the frontal lobes. Now, the frontal lobes of the brain, this is, you can call it the CEO of the brain. This is the part of the brain that helps you make good decisions. This is the part of the brain that helps you resist impulses. You know, do you hit everyone you'd like to hit? No, your frontal lobe is developed and you say it's not a good idea, especially if it's the boss, you know, and you don't do that. The problem with adolescence is that part of the brain is not finished. One of the key researchers on adolescents, Jay Geed, says they are like trucks without brakes. The emotional center of the brain is on high gear. The hormonal development is high gear. But the part of the brain that puts the brakes on some of those behaviors isn't well developed. And I remember that the phrase I probably used the most often when my three were in adolescence was, "What were you thinking?" And the answer is, they weren't. The answer is they weren't. Now here again, you know, you're walking a fine line, but you still need that control. This is acceptable, this is not acceptable. you know. And you know, the nice thing about adolescence is it's finally over. And you know, while I wasn't sure all 3 of my kids are fine, okay, but I will tell you that I would have given my daughter to anyone who would have taken her. All right. Okay, so kind of to wrap it up here. Consider the child's developmental stage. Those are the stages we talked about. What is okay at one stage is not okay at another. Choose the media wisely, all right? Watch what they are watching and see, is this the kind of behavior you want from your children? And set some limits. Educate your child about choosing what, you know, I think it's okay to tell kids that, you know, what they do is shaping the brains. If you spend 10 hours a day on video, that's the kind of a brain you're getting. You know, if you want a brain that makes good decisions, then you ought to be spending some time making decisions or doing something else. You know, adolescence, it's a wonderful time in a sense. It is the healthiest time of their entire lifespan, adolescence, with the highest death rate. And what is the leading cause of death in adolescence? That's suicide's second, car accidents are first. Because think about it, the car, the power, I can drive now, yeah, the truck without brakes, yeah. Look for some healthier activities, you know, and I find that when I can't get, Alex is grumbling because the timer is set and it just dinged. Let's go ride skateboards. Let's go ride scooters. You know, now that means I have to go watch. But try and find healthier things. Incidentally, there is a ton of research out there and on how exercise helps kids learn better. We have way too many kids sitting too much. It gets more oxygen to the brain, and the brain works better, and that's also true for you. Do you want to add anything to that, sir? Yeah. Jim and his wife have this wonderful program. You know, schools are supposed to provide, 200 minutes every 2 weeks of physical activity. They're not doing it. But I would say maybe his homework is done in the kitchen where you are. That would give you maybe a little bit more.
You can also set up rules about you know, you mentioned that your child has the ability to outmaneuver some of the built-in safeguards of the computer, and you can develop rules around your house about whether or not those things are touched. In other words, you might say, I never want the browser history cleared, and if it is, you lose your privileges so that you can always see where the child's gone. You know, and I don't know about turning off private browsing or how, you know, what the workarounds are for that, but you know, you might look to local parent support groups, or even ask at your school if the principal has thought about bringing in a presenter on a topic like this. I mean, this is the questions that you're asking are new questions because we haven't been here yet, and so there are other people asking the same questions, and schools are a great place to try to answer them.
Oh yes.
This is an area where they
Right.
are smarter than us.
Right, and it's not just computers. Everybody's got a computer right here, right? So even if you don't have a TV in your bedroom or a computer, you know, your child doesn't have a computer. If they've got this, they got a computer, right? So that's.
But I think Chuck has a really good point. I'm a therapist, and I'm really simplifying.
Yeah, I know. Are there ways? You know, I just read in the paper that some teens are now working with seniors to help them learn some basic computer. I think that would be a great idea. We have all of these retirement homes here in Napa, all right? And, you know, maybe getting a group of kids together, love to go and teach someone who's, you know, 60 or 70 how to operate, so to use those skills in a more productive way. Just another. I would agree on support groups. I will never forget getting together with some other parents. I thought my daughter was, you know, someone, kindergarten, you know, she had red hair. And so I'm in the grocery store one day and I see this woman with a child. There's only one school and only one kindergarten. And I said, is your child in kindergarten? And she said, yes. And she said, in fact, I volunteer. And I said, oh, my daughter's there. And she says, who is she? I said, she's the one with long red hair. And she said, oh, she is the sweetest child. And I went home that night and asked my daughter who the other redheaded girl was in class. Couldn't be mine. You know? But I'll never forget getting together when they were adolescents with some other parents and finding out that they were going through some of the same things, because I was beginning to think there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't control my child. I was raising this horrible person, you know. And she's
some of the research though, because I feel like a lot of the controls that are designed to give us control, you know, maybe it depends on the child and how rebellious they are, but it works up to a certain age level, and then you really do have choices.
And he may not be terribly excited by the research.
Well,
but at least you can should.
at least if I can back it up, I think
Yeah.
The other thing to remember is that, you know, of course, every child is different and every family is different. Your relationship with one child is going to be different than your relationship with another child. And don't forget that at 19, when they go away, we're out of control anyway. And so you're I don't know how old your child is, but at some point in the next 5 or 6 years, the game's done anyway. And so don't forget that you're on a continuum. You're on a road that eventually is going to end in you not having control anyway, right? And so if you exert too much control, that can absolutely backfire, right? So
find that middle road.
Yeah.
He might want to choose better. Yeah. I have a 25-year-old too, so.
And I'll bet the 25-year-old's okay. Yeah, the nicest thing I ever heard when my daughter was 40 and said, "I'm so glad you're around because you were such a good mom."
Oh, wow.
And I, yeah, see, so they're.
Yeah, I talk to teenagers, and you probably like me,
Yeah.
they do really like hearing about their own brain development and
Yes.
what
Yes.
influences it.
I just want to point out that in most of your slides you said learning, beginning, learning to socialize, learning to get along, learning languages. So it's an active process.
It is.
And I think a lot of us expect our children at 10 years old or 9 to know certain things already. And maybe they haven't arrived there yet.
That's true. It is, and you know, you give a little, you take little. I remember one of my boys was using language that I didn't think was appropriate, and I was just giving him all kinds of trouble, and he just kept using it. So I said to my husband, "Will you talk to him?" And he quit using that language. And I said, "What did you say?" And he said, "I said, don't use that language around your mother. She doesn't like it."
But this woman's point is a great segue to the last slide about what children can do.
Yes. They need to learn how their brains work. They need to know that this is a wonderful period for them. They are in charge of their own brain development during adolescence especially. Okay? So they need to become educated and critical consumers. You know, be really careful what research says. If there were only 5 people in the study, okay, right. Advocate for health-enhancing behaviors, emotional, physical, self. You know, maybe, you know, the exercise, you know, there's been a lot of research out there. Kids with ADHD do much better after a course in martial arts because it teaches control, etc. So maybe outside other, you know, maybe writing an article for other teens on, you know, something he has learned on what to do on the computer using their skills. So you need to determine what you want your brain and yourself to be. That's the message we need to give to kids. You're in control, you know, especially in adolescence. What kind of a brain do you want?
I think in adolescence too, this idea of working out and exercising and realizing that your brain is in some sense like a muscle that you can exercise, and so you choose how you're going to work it out. The things you spend time doing are the ways that your brain is going to become stronger. So how do you want to exercise your brain, right? Mm-hmm. On that screen or some way that's more. And one other thing I would add as we close is, have any of you ever heard of project-based learning? It's happening in many, many of our schools, right? In the Napa Valley Unified School District, it's becoming the default method of organizing lessons. And this is a promising development. And I want to connect it to a couple of the slides, because at each stage of K-12 that we looked at, there are things in project-based learning that are appropriate to the developmental tasks of children. And through project-based learning, we're using technology appropriately to help kids learn how to communicate clearly, learn how to work with peers, learn how to develop relationships, learn how to explain their learning, right? So that's helping them learn better when they don't just write it, but they talk about what they learn, when they teach somebody else what they just heard, right? So that if you hear about the 4 C's, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity, or project-based learning, these are all ways that locally we're trying to incorporate this research into what we're doing in the classrooms.
It's great to have classes for parents. I haven't found anything for teenagers, like that they could go through something where they could educate, something similar to this. That would be.
Barbara, I'd be happy to, if you can get anybody here, to run a class for adolescents and teach them about their brains. Yeah. No, I'd be, I've done that. I do it at the Wolf Center, and I've done it in, just some basic stuff on this is what's happening in your brain right now.
And this
And what
choose to do if you know.
And of course, the basic message is, what do you want your brain to look like? Yeah. 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 I don't know if they'll come or not, but. I'm old, and they may not listen to me, but. Yeah, there you go. Okay. I watched today, I volunteer at Bel Air Park Elementary School where the twins go. And at the end of the day, they were all sitting on the floor. And the kids were paying compliments to each other. And I thought, what did you see someone do today was the question that you would like to compliment. And they were saying things like, that so-and-so was really creative today and came up with a new way to do that. And then everybody clapped. We need to do that in our homes as well. Yeah. Don't give up, okay? You're probably intuitively, you're probably doing a very, very good job. It's tough. It's tough with the media and with all of the things they're being bombarded with. Support groups? Yeah. So if there are no other questions, right on the button, 8 o'clock. Thank you for coming.